Hello and welcome to Martech Advisor's Executive Interview Series. I'm Ginger Conlon, a contributing editor to Martech Advisor, and joining us today is Gil Eyal, who is CEO of HYPR Brands. Welcome, Gil.
Hi, Ginger. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here today. We're going to talk about your session and related topics at the upcoming Influencer Marketing Days 2017. We're going to get a sneak peek at your session, which is activating influencers, the mistakes we should not be making, and talk a little bit about influencer trends in general. So I'm excited about that. But let's first start with a little bit about you. Tell us about your background and about HYPR Brands.
Sure. So I've always been a marketer at heart. I have an MBA in marketing from Kellogg. I worked at a company called Playdom that developed games on MySpace and Facebook back in the day, and I was a growth hacker or a viral PM, and my job was to really identify audiences and make sure that every dollar we spent reached the right audience. And when I left that company, I started working for a company called Mobley, which was an early version of Instagram, very similar to Instagram, but much earlier. And the strategy that I had around getting an audience for this product was to work with celebrities and influencers. This was long before anybody knew of the term influencer marketing. And we ended up partnering with Leonardo DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire, Lance Armstrong, Serena Williams, Lil Wayne, and about 200 different celebrities and big name social media stars. And the idea was that we could use them to drive users to our app. And sometimes it worked really well, and other times it didn't work as well. And that's what led me to eventually start HYPR, because I understood that influencer marketing really isn't that different than traditional marketing channels. If you don't know who your audience is, or if you don't know how to reach your audience, you're not going to be successful. So I wanted to build a tool that allows you to understand who influences what today. You would never buy an advertising spot in a magazine without knowing who reads it. Why would you work with an influencer without knowing who their audience is?
Right. Oh, it makes so much sense. And, let's jump into talking about influencer marketing. It's interesting that you said that, before you started HYPR, it wasn't really, a common term. And it's interesting because, of course, influencer marketing has been around for so long. It's long established, but we didn't really talk about it that way. And because it's evolved so much, especially since the advent of digital and social, I think that, along with the terminology, that what is influencer marketing has evolved as well. So how are you seeing it defined today most commonly?
Completely. So I agree 100%. It's been around forever. And if you think about it, it's been around, nobody called it influencer marketing, but almost every decision, it's human nature to look for people that you respect to help you make a decision about. When you choose which movie to see on Friday night, when you choose what food to eat, when you choose which doctor to see, when you choose which car to buy, there's somebody in your life that's influential in those decisions because you respect their opinion about that subject, or because you're close to them and you can confide in them. So that element of human nature is something that's translated now with the advent of social networks, something measurable. We can find influencers who aren't the typical celebrities or the big name 100 million follower celebrities or influencers, and say they're also influencers or micro influencers. You can call them whatever you want, but they're influential people that have an audience that respects their opinion about a specific subject. And in my mind, saying everyone's an influencer is obvious, but not everyone's a professional influencer or somebody that you could use. Anybody that's really dominant and really has an opinion that can move an audience in a specific area is an influencer.
Right. Yeah, and that makes so much sense. I mean, just because they have, a million followers, if those million followers are just interested in seeing their photos and aren't interested in hearing what their opinion about something, that's not necessarily going to be influential for brands.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. One of the things we see all the time are brands that target a female audience, maybe a beauty brand or a makeup or fashion brand, going after these Instagram models who are fitness models or who are bikini models. And they're using that old model where you would put a woman in a magazine and that would sell bikinis or that would sell makeup, but they're not neglecting to understand that the people following these influencers are men hoping to see women in bikinis. They're not women who are going to buy that brand. And the result is that they're getting poor results for their campaigns, and they're saying influencer marketing doesn't work, but really they're just not doing it the right way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You really, like you said, you have to understand who your audience is. And, thinking about that, what are some of the common ways that you're seeing marketers using influencers today? And how do you see influencer marketing evolving?
So I think maybe the main shift that we're seeing is that brands are understanding that there's a value to long-term relationships and that smaller influencers have stronger audiences. So with the first one is we're seeing brands like L'Oreal start the L'Oreal League, a lot of other brands building long-term relationships with influencers. It's no longer just here's $1,000, go post about my brand on your Instagram and everybody will be happy, but here's a long-term relationship. Every time there's new content, please post it and be a champion for my brand. And it's a much more authentic and believable experience for the audience. And the second, maybe more important part is that they're targeting specific individuals. So not every brand is now trying to land a Kardashian or trying to land a Justin Bieber. They're understanding that there's expertise in their topic area that people will benefit from, and that person that has a cooking channel has an audience that's only interested in cooking. So they might have a much smaller audience, but that audience is very dedicated and very close to that influencer. And if you have a product that's related to cooking, that's a much better place to put it on from a cost perspective and from an ROI perspective, because you'll convert much better and it'll be much more authentic and believable. And then finally, what we're seeing is that brands are really shifting the power. If it used to be that brands were willing to pay in advance and just pray for results, brands are starting to ask for analytics and starting to suspect that there might be manipulation or fraud, and they're being much more careful about identifying those things in advance. And I think that's going to be a really good shift over the next year or two, where we're going to see technology develop to help brands identify the real influencers from the fakers.
Right. Yeah, that's important. I mean, every marketing dollar that you invest, you want to make sure that you're getting as much back from that as you can.
Absolutely.
So when marketers select an influencer, do you see any common criteria that they're using? And is there anything that you see marketers overlooking that they maybe should consider, like you were saying before about make sure you know the audience?
Absolutely. One of the metrics in this industry that's mind-boggling in my mind is how many followers an influencer has. And that's a metric that means really nothing except that in one certain point in time, a lot of people are interested in that influencer. If you think about somebody like Rebecca Black, who came out with the song Friday a few years ago, I think she has 6 million subscribers to her YouTube channel, but they're all inactive. And they no longer really follow or care what she has to talk about. So if you look at that metric and you don't know who she is, you might say, wow, this is a huge influencer. I could really benefit from working with them. But the result is that you won't get a lot of engagement or a lot of audience. And the same thing applies to big name celebrities. I follow celebrities like Lil Wayne and Pitbull. Does that mean I will actually do what they say? Of course not. I follow them because everyone follows them, because they're recommended when you sign up for the app. And I listen to their songs if they pop up on the radio. So I think the biggest mistake is being blinded by these vanity metrics and saying, oh, wow, a lot of followers or even a lot of engagement, but irrelevant engagement won't really produce results for you. And it's the number one common mistake. And people really worry about fraud and about what if influencers have fake followers, but really what's the difference between fake followers and inactive followers? What you should worry about is how many real engaged followers do they have that will care about my product. Fake, inactive, it's all the same. They're not going to buy your product. So make sure you verify that you're not hiring somebody that has a lot of those.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned one mistake, which is looking at the wrong metrics, and, at your session, which is basically the mistakes that you shouldn't be making, give us just like a sneak peek into another mistake that you should avoid when activating influencers.
Sure. This is one I hear all the time, which is brands need to relinquish control. You need to give influencers know their audience. They know how to get their audience engaged. If you want to work with influencers, you have to relinquish control and let them make decisions. And I think that's terrible advice. And we have a lot of examples where relinquishing control has gotten brands in trouble. I think most recently we saw Disney get in trouble with Jake Paul and insulting his neighbors. And the truth is, nobody knows your audience better than you do, and nobody's done as much A/B testing, and nobody's evaluated which messaging works, and nobody's understood what actually gets your audience to spend money or to buy your product or to be interested in your product as much as your own team. And that's what you do professionally. Influencers are great at generating attention around themselves, a lot of times through actions that are not really good to be associated with. It could be behaving crazy. It could be doing things that are gray area morally. It could be doing things that are really silly and funny, but you don't want to be associated with as a brand. So my argument is you always have to control the message, and it doesn't matter which influencer you're working with. You need to own the message, you need to control it, and you need to make it work within the influencer's capabilities and within their talents and with something that would appeal to their audience and would feel authentic. But it still has to be your message. It has to be that message that you've spent so much money testing and understanding that works.
Right. This seems like that goes back to what you were saying before about the trend of having more longer term relationships, because you can find that authenticity rather between your brand message and the influencers that are that good fit.
Absolutely, and I think the long-term relationship also changes the incentives within the relationship with the influencer. If an influencer knows that they have a future with you, they're going to be a lot more careful with your brand. If they know this is a one-time thing and they move on and they get paid, then they'll do what they need to do, and it's human nature, and some of them will do a great job, some won't. If they're looking for a long-term relationship, if this is a job, if this is something that generates revenue and credibility for them in the long term, they're going to be very serious about it, and they're going to care about making you happy a lot more. So building those long-term relationships allows you to, for one, build a stronger rapport with them. Two, if you take a group of influencers, is see which ones are performing better and strengthen that relationship. And for the ones that aren't performing as well, reduce the relationship. And that's something that's just a lot of brands don't seem to do. They kind of want to do that one hit, have an influencer post about them, enjoy the 2 days of conversation that generates on social media, but they don't really think about what's driving the right incentives.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So you talked before about some of the ways that marketers are using influencers. Give us an example of maybe the most creative way you've seen marketers using influencers.
My favorite recently, and I smile every time I think about it, is Starbucks and their unicorn frappuccino. I'm sure everybody's heard about this. So basically what they did is they had their own people, the baristas, start tweeting out and going on Instagram and on Facebook saying, nobody buy this product. I'm covered in glitter. I can't do this anymore. I can't make a single one of these. And it happens to be like this pinkish, glowy, weird colored product that you wouldn't want in your body if you're health conscious at all. But the attention that got was genuine and amazing. And what do you see when you hear, what do you think when you hear a barista saying, don't ask for this? One is you have to share it because your friends have to see how Starbucks employees telling you not to buy a product. And two is you have to walk into one and order one because you want to see what's so bad about making them. And I thought it was a brilliant, brilliant campaign, the kind that didn't touch any of the big name influencers that cost a ton of money. You use these smaller niche influencers that have a real relationship with the brand, seemed completely authentic, and you just produced amazing results. They were on every news source possible because it was a great story.
Yeah, that's a terrific story. And Gil, thank you so much. Thanks for all the great advice and for giving us that sneak peek into your session at Influencer Marketing Days 2017.
Thanks for having me. I can't wait to meet everyone on the premises.
Yeah, definitely. I want to let everyone know, be sure to check out Influencer Marketing Days website for more information on the conference and on Gil's session. And also be sure to visit Martech Advisors YouTube channel for other executive interviews. And thanks everyone for being here.